Before there was Fire Emblem, there was Advance Wars. This is Nintendo's original turn-based strategy game that premiered back in 1988 as Famicom Wars, later getting its first US release with Advance Wars on the GBA in 2001. This Nintendo Switch reboot is a collection of the first two games released in the US, originally for the Game Boy Advance. Developed by Wayforward, they give Advance Wars the modern makeover with completely new graphics, animation, and some refinements for the modern age. Advance Wars starts with Orange Star Nation battling against their neighboring country, Blue Moon. Along the way, you'll come across other countries consisting of Green Earth and Gold Comet. Each country has their set of commanding officers with varying personalities and equally diverse abilities. While the grand narrative is a bit basic and bland, it does get a facelift with this reboot as the commanding officers actually verbally speak now. This continues on with the sequel story in Black Hole Rising. This picks up from the events in the first game that, equally so, are a bit shallow in terms of story. Nevertheless, it's available from the get-go for anyone that wants to completely ruin the basic story of the first game and start the sequel first. Advance Wars is a turn-based tactics game that should scratch the itch for anyone that's a fan of games like Fire Emblem and XCOM. You'll easily spend about 50 hours across the two campaigns and bonus game modes that'll have you strategizing the most efficient ways to win the battle. Despite its cute and adorable looks, Advance Wars shouldn't be mistaken for an easy game. The first game does a good job at walking you through the gameplay's various mechanics. Each of the country's introduction levels focus on explaining mechanics that ultimately lead to much more challenging levels toward the end of the section. These early missions will introduce you to various terrains, vehicles, and objectives, and so on. It might seem like a lot at first, but in practice, they add a well-welcome splash of variety across the battlefield. It's important too, because while there aren't too many game modes in Advance Wars, the various elements help keep the gameplay feeling new and challenging even after you've completed the campaign. As you get a hold of all the vehicles and various elements, you'll slowly come to realize that there's still more to learn. Maps that look basic at first quickly change up the tide of battle as you begin to learn how they affect the battle. Thick Fog, for example, requires you to send out recon teams to look for possible enemies. Bridges act as choke points, turning a simple battle on paper into a staggering one. It's fun in a challenging way, managing your army, figuring out the correct and most efficient route, and most importantly, learning from your mistakes is an enjoyable loop. Various battles have different objectives, so while you may have to defeat all the enemies in one battle, another may just require you to take over the enemy's HQ. Figuring out how to complete said objective quickly without losing any teammates is how you earn the best score. The commanding officers, the characters you play as and against, also feature their own powers and superpowers in the sequel that add a nice layer of strategy to the combat. Annie, for example, can fix vehicles, a useful tool when your soldier count is running low. Outside of the campaign, you'll have access to the War Room. This is the mode where you can compete against AI opponents using parameters that you have set. Changing up map elements, victory conditions, and map sizes help make this one of the more entertaining and challenging game modes. Equally, the Design Room map editor lets you make your own maps to play on or even share with your friends through online mode. Speaking of which, the online mode, which honestly should be the star of this reboot, is sadly a shallow execution. Yes, you can play your levels online, but this is limited to people you have on your friends list. This means if you don't have any friends playing online, well then you're basically left with the campaign and the War Room mode. There is an option to play locally, but again, unless you're playing on the same console or with someone near you that has the game, you'll be playing against AI for the most part. And while that's disappointing, especially for a modern remake, thankfully the core experience is still intact. Better yet, the quality of life improvements like being able to zoom in on the map, fast forwarding attacks, and replaying your last turn make this the most accessible way to play. Originally released with the 16-bit looking presentation on the GBA, Rebooted gets a major overhaul on Nintendo Switch. Instead of having the pixel art style, this new version has been completely redone in 3D. The map, for example, now features 3D rendered visuals, making different environmental features like water and mountains really pop. It would have been cool to be able to switch between the two visual styles, but at least the new visuals look pretty good. The new maps almost feel like a toy box with a chibi look to them that comes off like plastic toys. It's oddly cute and charming. With that said, I do prefer the GBA pixel look more, at least for the gameplay section. Perhaps my favorite new revision to the presentation though are the character models and the portraits that are textured to look hand-drawn. They look similar to Wayforward's other retro reboots like DuckTales and Shantae. However, despite the animated 2D look, their 3D models look absolutely fantastic. They evoke a level of expression and personality that elevates the rest of the presentation as a whole. In terms of performance, Advance Wars runs at a native 1080p in dock mode and 720p in handheld mode. The colorful graphics along with the sharp lines around character models makes Advance Wars look crisp and clear. Frame rate on the other hand really just depends on the situation. In the overview map of the game, you will get a low 30 FPS presentation with the odd frame pacing. In the actual battle animations, those get an unlocked frame rate that tends to hover around 45 frames per second. While certainly not ideal, the fact that this is a turn-based strategy game makes it a bit more of a forgivable hiccup since it's not so important to the gameplay. Alongside its new visuals, Advance Wars gets some well-welcome additions to its audio. The new commanding officer animations feature partial voice acting, adding on to the charm and ultimately helping to solidify some of the story elements of the campaign. The music from the original game also makes a return. It continues to be as catchy as the original release, only now helping to further complement all the new polished presentation. There's even a fully animated introduction now, and it sounds and looks stunning. Advance Wars on Nintendo Switch is a great modernization of one of Nintendo's best designed strategy. The updated visuals may not be for everyone, but the animated character portraits and cutscenes no doubt are a major improvement. The updated presentation also adds the quality of life improvements like being able to zoom in around the map, now that you're not limited to just the GBA screen. Performance could be a bit better, and online play could be a bit more accessible, but even with those caveats, this repeated take on the series preserves the memorable gameplay of the original while elevating its presentation. For those into the classic strategy gameplay of Fire Emblem but never played Advance Wars, I highly recommend you do so, especially now.